guess from my background is I've coached everything from under 12s, under 14, 16s, from club, rep, state level. So I've got an understanding of what it's like to work in that pathway as you go along and go upgrades, and obviously with different age groups about where they're at with their types of like learning and how they learn and how to teach. And I guess as I've gotten older and becoming older, as you look back and reflect how you could have done things differently, I guess tonight's, presentation, I guess there's probably a lot more questions than there is answers. So there's questions that I'll approach to you to think about with your own teams or your own coaching and how you might go about those things. So while there are some answers in there, there are some questions which I think is important that as you go through the PowerPoint is to ask yourself how that, I guess, relates back to your coaching or your team or how you're currently doing things. And as Jared said, is prepared to have like any questions at the end flow through Jared on anything from this topic to WNBL to Opals to any questions that you've got throughout. So please feel free to jot them down like as we go. So I will start with my PowerPoint. So I guess number one thing is Jared asked me, spoke about is teaching juniors like how to play. And I think that there's two things to talk about that when we get through them is teaching versus coaching. And I think there's two different ways of like looking at it. I think number one, when I look back at coaching and when I coach players now, is about teaching them how to play and then teaching them how to practice before we teach any sort of system or style of play. And I think that's really important, no matter whether I think my personal philosophy is no matter whether they be under 12s through to under 18s, whatever, is I don't think teaching them the system and the style is so much as important as teaching them good practice habits first and foremost, because if they don't develop those practice habits, then they aren't going to develop like the skills necessary to be able to play the game and compete. So I think that building practice habits is my first thing, and then getting them into skill and competitive situations to be able to develop your team. And when we talk about junior coaching, is number one to me is like skill work. They've got to have the skills necessary to be able to play in whatever system or whatever style that you choose your team to play in. You've got to teach them how to be competitive, and there's lots of different ways of doing that, whether it's shooting drills, whether it's small-sided games, whether it's even like in the warm-up. So getting an idea of how you teach kids to be competitive, whether it's a time limit, it might be to a certain number of scores on a shooting drill or on a game situation, but it's going back to like teach them how to practice hard, and then that'll flow into how they actually play in the game. The third point about giving them tools to play in any system, I think that is more relatable to as they get older. I think some people, if you just tend to stay in your own like system, it doesn't allow for what I term growth development. So if that kid was to go up next year and play in a totally different style or format or style of play, have they got the ability to be able to transfer the skills that you've given them to play in a different style or in a different, offensive structure? And I think that's our job as coaches, is to give them the best skill so that when they leave us to go into, so if an under 12 goes to an under 14, they've actually got the skills necessary to go into that next age group and maybe being coached in a different style of game. They might have, gone from a flex offense to a shuffle offense to a motion offense, but it's have you given them the skills to be able to be, independent of being able to play in different styles and different systems. The fourth point is I look at practice time is to teach, games are to coach. So when you think about like practice, think about it like as in you're teaching them how to play and teaching them the drills and the skills and the decision-making necessary to play the game. Because I term coaching is what we do when we actually get to coach the game. We should think about practice as far as being a teacher of the game, not as a coach. And I guess the things that when you think about teaching and practicing is like, you've got to teach decision-making. how you teach the kids how to make decisions, whether that's 2-on-1, 3-on-2, what they see, and asking questions of the players, getting their feel for how they actually feel the game and what they actually see. Because, in a game of basketball, there's lots of choices. Do I make, do I pass? Do I shoot? Do I dribble? Do I score? Do I go set a screen? No matter what it is, there's lots of choices and lots of decisions that they make. And I think the more that you can actually, rather than just as coaches, sometimes we tend just to tell and give the advice and give the end product give the answer all the time, is ask the players what they think, what they see, what their decision was and why. And I think that's important to develop their own understanding of the game. And obviously, there's lots of space, there's ball movement with and without the ball, and how we start to teach and coach that within our own systems. Another part is winning versus development, and that's always an interesting one for us coaches who like to win. It's always an interesting conundrum whether you want to go down the track of you're all about like the winning, and whether that overrides your ability to be able to develop talent. And I think about what can you do both. I think there is time and a place to be able to do both within your teams. And I think as coaches, it is on us to be able to develop the players to the best of our ability and to get the best out of their own talent as we can. And if we do that, you're going to win games. And it's always, I guess, an interesting thing about what people term success. Because success to me sometimes isn't always, I guess, winning a championship. You might be successful about developing your team or developing your style or developing your structure into being something better than it was when you first took the team. And I think that's an interesting thing of I think you can win and you can develop at the same time. And I'm all about, yes, we all want to win, but I think our number one priority is to develop our kids' skills and talent in the game. And I guess the last one on teaching and coaching, and it's more so not about teaching juniors, I guess, how to play, but how you as a coach, I guess, manage expectations within your own groups. Because to me, that's part of, it's not just you and the 10 players. You might be managing an assistant coach as well. How are you teaching? How are you forming? How are you relationship building with your assistant coaches? Because you may not be only just teaching the players how to play. You might be a mentor to somebody. How are you helping them along? Are you giving them instructions? Are you giving them stats to take? How do you actually include them in timeouts? How do you actually include stats or analytics if you want to go down that path with your teams? I guess the next one is philosophy. I think getting right to the crux of teaching whether it's juniors, seniors, whatever you're about to go into, I think you've got to have a great plan in around what is your philosophy and how you want to play the game. Because I think that's the most important thing for every coach, is to be able to have a definitive style of play that suits you. So if number one thing is what is your philosophy? And I break that into two teams. Is how do you want your team to play on offense? How do you want your team to play on defense? And there's lots of little, I guess, subtitles and sub areas within those two themes. But I think before you go into a season, before you plan your practice, before you formulate what you want to coach and how you want to coach it, I think the philosophy is the number one thing about how you want to play the game and how you can suit that style with your players, and how do your players fit that style.